Welcome to another story on our channel. Today's story is titled, The Princess Never Knew That Her Heart Could Choose a Servant Over a King. Enjoy. The royal convoy of 3 black bulletproof SUVs slid through the bustling heart of Lagos like silent, predatory sharks. Inside the lead vehicle, Princess Chinyu Izziadi of the Ubium Kingdom scrolled absently through a financial report on her tablet, the glow of the screen highlighting the sharp, elegant lines of her profile. Outside, the chaotic symphony of the city, the blaring horns of Danfo buses, the hawkers balancing trays of goods on their heads, the vibrant, colorful murals on crumbling walls, was reduced to a muted hum behind the soundproof glass. "Your father expects you at the palace by 6, a voice crackled through the car's speaker system. It was Chief Amizi, the king's stern-faced advisor. "The Oba of Ibadan's son, Prince Tund, will be joining us for dinner. It is an important dinner." Chinyu didn't need to be told. Her father, the Obi, had been less than subtle for weeks. An alliance with the powerful Oba of Ibadan, sealed by marriage, would be a masterstroke. It would merge influence, consolidate political power, and, as her father loved to say in private, future-proof our throne in this modern Nigeria. It was all very logical, and to Chinyu, it felt like a beautifully gilded cage. "I understand, Chief. My last meeting is at the Foundation." "I will be there," she replied, her voice even, betraying none of the turmoil simmering beneath her calm exterior. She ended the call and sighed, leaning her head back against the cool leather. Her phone, a separate, sleek device from her official one, buzzed. A message lit up the screen. "Delhi, security sweep complete the ZDU Foundation building. All clear. The new coding lab is impressive. The kids are already building apps." A small, genuine smile touched her lips. Delhi was, well, he was her head of personal security. Officially. Unofficially, he was the only person in her orbit who didn't treat her like a porcelain doll on a high shelf. He was a paradox, a man built like a warrior, with a calm that could soothe a storm, and a sharp mind that was always 3 steps ahead of any threat. She typed back, "On my way. Save me from the mayor's long speech. Delhi, I'll fake a security alert if I have to." The convoy pulled up to a gleaming, modern building, a beacon of hope in a crowded neighborhood. The Izziadi Youth Foundation was her life's work, her sanctuary from the endless royal protocols. As her door was opened by a guard, she stepped out, the humid air a stark contrast to the car's chilled interior. Delhi was already there, waiting at the entrance. He didn't bow or make a grand gesture. He simply gave a slight, respectful nod, his eyes, the color of dark honey, meeting hers for a brief, electric moment. He was tall and solid, dressed in a simple, well-fitted black suit, an earpiece wired discreetly trailing down his neck. "Your Highness," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Delhi," she acknowledged, and together they walked inside, his presence a steady, reassuring force at her side. The event was a success. The children, bright-eyed and eager, showed her their projects. But throughout the speeches and the handshakes, Chinyu was acutely aware of 2 things, the ticking clock counting down to her dinner with Prince Tund, and Delhi's silent, watchful presence in the corner of the room. Later, as they prepared to leave, a commotion erupted outside. A crowd had gathered, agitated. A local politician, threatened by the Foundation's empowerment of the youth, had sent his thugs. They were shouting, brandishing sticks, trying to storm the gates. The royal guards tensed, hands going to their weapons. "Get the princess to the car," one of them barked. But before anyone could move, Delhi was already in motion. He didn't draw his weapon. Instead, he walked calmly towards the main gate, towards the raging crowd. Chinyu watched, her heart in her throat, as he began to speak to the ringleader. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw his posture, not aggressive, but firm. Unshakable. He was listening, then reasoning, his voice carrying a quiet authority that demanded attention. After a tense minute, the shouting died down. The sticks were lowered. Delhi nodded, said a few more words, and then turned and walked back to the convoy, as if he'd just settled a minor disagreement between friends. He opened the car door for her. As she slid in, she looked up at him. "What did you say to them?" He paused, his hand on the door. "I reminded them that the Foundation's success is their children's success, and that a burning building teaches no one how to code." A ghost of a smile played on his lips. "Also, I may have mentioned that the Obi's security detail has facial recognition on every one of them, and their leader has an outstanding warrant in Port Harcourt. They chose the smarter path." Chinyu stared at him, a wave of admiration so strong it left her breathless. He hadn't used brute force, he'd used intelligence, local knowledge, and sheer nerve. He had defused a potential disaster without a single shot fired. The drive to the royal palace in Eubium was silent. Chinyu looked out at the fading light, the image of Delhi facing down that crowd seared into her mind. It was a stark contrast to the man waiting for her in the palace. Prince Tund was, by all accounts, perfect. Handsome, educated at Oxford, dripping in designer traditional wear and an air of entitled charm. He held her chair out, complimented her beauty, and spoke eloquently about macroeconomic trends. But as Chinyu sat through the 5-course dinner, making polite conversation, all she could think about was the quiet, capable man who was probably right now, just outside the door, ensuring her safety. She remembered the way he'd looked at her after the incident, not expecting praise, just ensuring she was okay. Prince Tund laughed at something her father said, a rich, practiced sound. He was a king in waiting, a man who could offer her a throne. But Delhi was the man who made her feel safe, seen, real. Later that night, unable to sleep, she stood on her balcony overlooking the manicured palace gardens. She saw a solitary figure making his rounds below, a dark silhouette against the moonlit paths. It was Delhi on duty even now. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Delhi, all quiet. You should rest. She looked from the message to the figure in the garden, and then back towards the wing of the palace where Prince Tund was sleeping. A cold, terrifying, and thrilling realization dawned on her. The stakes were impossibly high. Her duty, her family's legacy, a powerful alliance, it all pointed to the prince. It was the only logical choice. But her heart, her treacherous, rebellious heart, was making a very different, very dangerous choice. And for the first time, Princess Chinyu Izziadi, daughter of the Obi of Eubium, was truly afraid. Not of political fallout or her father's anger, but of the terrifying power of her own heart, which dared to choose a servant over a king. The morning after the dinner with Prince Tund, Chinyu's official schedule was a masterpiece of evasion. It was a document curated by Chief Amizi and her father, designed to keep her moving, to prevent her from thinking too deeply, from feeling the full weight of the cage descending around her. 7 a.m., breakfast with the Obi and Prince Tund. 9 a.m., review of architectural plans for the new Eubium National Museum. 11 a.m., photo shoot for today's Woman magazine, highlighting modern royalty and philanthropy. 1 p.m., luncheon with the wives of the Council of Chiefs. Each item was a brick, meticulously placed in a wall between her and her old life. Breakfast was a torturous affair of polite smiles and thinly veiled assessments. The Obi, her father, was in his element, expansive and jovial, telling stories of Eubium's history with a twinkle in his eye that Chinyu knew was reserved for politically advantageous moments. Prince Tund played his part perfectly. He was charming, deferential to her father, and paid Chinyu compliments that were as polished as they were impersonal. The princess has a formidable mind, Tund said, sipping his tea. Her foundation's work is quite the talk in Abaddon. It's refreshing to see a royal who is so hands-on. The word hands-on felt like a subtle dismissal, reducing her life's work to a hobby. She forced a smile. Thank you, Prince Tund. It's more than a project. It's a necessity. Of course, he agreed smoothly, but his eyes were already drifting towards her father, ready to engage in the real conversation, the one about oil revenue shares and senatorial alliances. Chinyu's eyes flickered to the doorway, where Delhi stood at his post. His back was to them, a picture of professional detachment, but she saw the rigid set of his shoulders. He was listening. He was always listening. A part of her, a wild, foolish part, wondered what he was thinking. Did he hear the emptiness in Tund's praise? Did he sense her suffocation? After breakfast, as she was ushered towards a library to review the museum plans, she passed him. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. In that fleeting moment, she saw not the blank stare of a guard, but a deep, unsettling understanding. It was as if he could see straight through the elegant Ankara wrap and the royal composure, right down to the frantic, trapped bird beating its wings against her ribs. Then the moment was gone, and he was just her security detail again, his face an impassive mask. The photo shoot was its own special kind of hell. Stylists fussed over her, draping her in heavy, beaded fabrics that felt like chain mail. The photographer, a flamboyant man from Lagos, kept cooing, "Yes, princess. Give us regal. Give us grace. Think of your legacy." Legacy. The word echoed in her mind. Was her legacy to be a series of beautiful, frozen images in a magazine, married off to secure a political deal? She thought of the kids at the foundation, their faces alive with passion and code. That was a legacy. This was a performance. During a break, as she sipped water in a corner, her personal phone vibrated. It was a message from her best friend, Amara, who was studying in London. Amara, so? The gossip blogs are already buzzing. Are the kingdoms of Eubium and Abaddon set to unite? Spill everything. Is he as boring as he looks in pictures? Chinyu's fingers flew over the screen, a desperate, private confession. Chinyu, it's worse. He's perfect, and it feels like I'm being buried alive. Father hasn't stopped smiling. It's a done deal in his mind. Amara, oh Chinyu, can you talk to him? Chinyu, and say what? That my heart isn't in it. He'd say hearts are not for kings and queens. He'd say it's my duty. She looked up and saw Chief Amizi watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable. She quickly put the phone away, the sense of being constantly monitored closing in on her. The luncheon was a symphony of subtle pressure. The chief's wives, older women who had navigated their own political marriages, offered advice wrapped in proverbs. A river that does not know its source will run dry, said one, patting Chinyu's hand. Your source is Eubium. Your strength comes from its strength. A tree does not stand against the wind alone, added another, her meaning clear. The alliance with Abaddon was the forest that would protect her tree. They were not unkind. They believed they were guiding her, preparing her for her destiny. But their words felt like vines, twisting around her, pulling her deeper into a preordained path. By the time the luncheon ended, Chinyu felt brittle, as if one more touch would shatter her. She needed air. She needed to be anywhere but the palace. I'm going to the foundation, she announced to Chief Amizi, who had materialized at her elbow. Your Highness, your schedule, he began, his tone placating but firm. Is mine to command, Chief, she cut in, a rare flash of steel in her voice. There is an issue with the server firewalls that requires my immediate attention. It is a security risk. She didn't look at Delhi, but she knew he was listening. She was using his world, the world of threats and safeguards, as her excuse. Umizi's lips tightened, but he inclined his head. As you wish. But we must be back by 6. You and Prince Tund are attending the opera. Of course they were. Another public display. Another brick. The drive to the foundation was silent. Chinyu stared out the window, watching the city transform from the manicured gardens of the government-reserved area to the vibrant, chaotic streets of Suralire. Here life was messy and real. People fought, loved, and built their lives on their own terms. She envied them with a ferocity that startled her. At the foundation, the children were in the middle of a robotics workshop. The room buzzed with energy, the whir of small motors, and the excited shouts of teenagers. For the first time all day, Chinyu felt the tension in her shoulders ease. This was real. She shed her royal demeanor like a heavy cloak, rolling up the sleeves of her blouse and kneeling beside a group struggling to calibrate their robot sensors. Try adjusting the light sensitivity here, she said, pointing to a line of code on their laptop. She lost track of time, immersed in the problem. When she finally looked up, she saw Delhi leaning against the doorframe, watching her. He wasn't scanning for threats for once. He was just watching. And the look in his eyes wasn't one of duty or professional observation. It was soft. It was admiration. Her breath caught. It was the same look he'd had after the crowd incident, but deeper, more profound. In the stark fluorescent light of the lab, with the sounds of innovation around them, the invisible wall between princess and guard seemed to flicker and fade. One of the kids, a bright girl named Ifioma, successfully got her robot to navigate a maze. The group cheered, and Ifioma, in her excitement, turned and hugged Chinyu. It was an impulsive, genuine gesture of joy. Chinyu hugged her back, laughing, her heart feeling light for the first time in days. When she pulled away, her eyes instinctively found Delhi's again. He was smiling. A real proper smile that reached his eyes, transforming his usually stern face. It was a bolt of lightning to her soul. The moment was shattered by the sharp ringtone of her official phone. Chief Amizi. The real world was calling her back. We need to leave, Your Highness, Delhi said, his smile vanishing, the professional mask slamming back into place. The opera. The ride back to the palace to change was a descent back into silence. But this silence was different. It was charged, thick with everything that had been silently communicated in that lab. Back in her chambers, as her maid laid out a stunning, beaded gown for the opera, Chinyu stood on her balcony again. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. She replayed the moment in the lab over and over, the hug, the laughter, the look in Deli's eyes. A soft knock came at her balcony door. She turned, startled. It was Deli. He never came to her private chambers. He remained on the other side of the threshold, respecting the boundary. "Your Highness," he said, his voice low. "I need to brief you on the security arrangements for the Opera House." "Of course," she said, her heart hammering against her ribs. He went through the details, the route, the entrances and exits, the team placements. His voice was all business, but his eyes held hers, and they were saying something else entirely. When he finished, he didn't move. The space between them hummed with tension. "Deli," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He can give you a throne, Chinyu," he said, breaking protocol so completely it stole the air from her lungs. He used her name. Not her title. Just her name. It sounded like a prayer on his lips. "He can give you a kingdom. But does he see you? The real you? The one who reads code like poetry, and whose laugh sounds like freedom?" Tears she didn't know she was holding back sprang to her eyes. He had put her deepest, most secret fear into words. "My duty," she began, her voice trembling. "I know your duty," he interrupted, his own voice rough with emotion. "And I would never ask you to abandon it. My duty is to protect you, even if it's from a future that would slowly extinguish your light." He took a half-step back, re-establishing the physical distance, but the emotional chasm between them had been irrevocably bridged. I needed you to know that you are seen." He gave a short, sharp nod, a soldier's gesture, and then he was gone, melting back into the shadows of the palace. Chinyu stood frozen, his words echoing in the silent space he left behind. "You are seen." The emotional stakes were no longer just about her personal happiness versus her duty. It was now a battle between two futures. One was a gilded, loveless existence as a queen, a symbol in a powerful alliance. The other was a terrifying, uncertain path that promised something infinitely more precious, being truly known and loved for who she was. But choosing that path wouldn't just mean defying her father. It would mean breaking an alliance that could destabilize the region. It would bring shame to her family and her kingdom. It could cost Deli his job, his freedom, maybe even his life. The Obi did not take slights lightly, and the ultimate slight would be his daughter choosing a servant over a king. The weight of it crushed down on her. This wasn't a romantic fantasy. It was a political earthquake waiting to happen. And as her maid helped her into the exquisite, heavy gown for the opera, Chinyu felt the price of a crown she never asked for, and the terrifying, irresistible pull of a heart that had already chosen. The opera was a beautiful, hollow performance. Chinyu sat in the plush velvet seat of the royal box, the tragic Italian arias washing over her without touching her heart. Prince Tun sat beside her, a dignified and impressive figure. He would occasionally lean in to whisper a correct observation about the music or the set design. He was perfect, and she felt absolutely nothing. Every part of her was aware of the silent, watchful presence standing in the shadows at the back of the box. "Deli," his words from a balcony, "You are seen," were a secret song playing in her mind, drowning out the orchestra. When Tun commented on the soprano's technical skill, all Chinyu could think was that Deli had noticed the way her eyes lit up when a child at the foundation finally debugged their code. After the final, thundering curtain call, Tun offered his arm. "A powerful performance. Don't you agree, Princess?" "It was very controlled," Chinyu replied, the word tasting like ash. "Precision is the mark of excellence," Tun said, guiding her out. "Passion is the mark of life," she thought, but said nothing. The return to the palace was a silent affair. Tun was engrossed in his phone, and Chinyu was lost in a war within herself. One path was paved with gold and duty, leading to a throne beside a man who saw her as a prize. The other was a dangerous, hidden trail that called to her very soul. Back in her wing, the formal goodnight was a brief, polite affair. "I look forward to our tour of the new museum tomorrow, Princess," Tun said with a slight, correct bow. "Until tomorrow," she echoed, her voice faint. Once inside, the walls of her suite felt like they were closing in. She needed air. Slipping out into the private gardens, she followed the familiar path to her sanctuary, the stone bench hidden by the wisteria. The moon was high, casting a silvery glow on the fountain. She hadn't been there 5 minutes when a soft footfall made her turn. Deli stood a few yards away, his hands clasped behind his back, the picture of professional duty. "You shouldn't be out here alone, Your Highness." The gardens are within the palace grounds, she said, her heart doing a foolish little flip. Nowhere is completely safe, he replied, his voice low and steady. But he took a few steps closer, until he was standing at the edge of the wistaria's canopy. And you looked upset after the opera. The simple concern in his voice was her undoing. The careful wall she maintained around her emotions crumbled. He didn't understand it, she whispered, looking at the water. The opera. He only saw the technique, not the heart of it. She dared to look up at him. You see the heart of things. You always have. His professional composure faltered. In the moonlight, his expression was open, vulnerable. It's my job to see what others miss. Is that all it is? The question hung between them, brave and terrifying. For a long moment, he was silent. The night sounds of crickets and the distant hum of a city seemed to grow louder. Then he slowly shook his head. No, he breathed. No, it's not. He didn't move from his spot, but the space between them seemed to vanish. The air crackled with everything they couldn't say, every glance they'd shared, every unspoken understanding. Chinyu, he said, and her name was a prayer on his lips. When I see you with those children, when you forget you're a princess and you're just you, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. Tears pricked her eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Princes complimented her grace, her intelligence, her bloodline. Delhi saw her. Prince Tund can offer you a kingdom, Delhi continued, his voice thick with an emotion that made her heart ache. I can only offer you my loyalty, my protection. But it comes from a place that has nothing to do with duty. It was the closest either of them had come to a declaration. It was more powerful, more real, than any grand gesture. Your loyalty means more to me than any kingdom, she whispered, the truth of it settling deep in her soul. A soft rustle in the hedges made them both start. Delhi immediately took 2 steps back, putting a respectful distance between them, his face shifting seamlessly back into its guarded mask. A palace cat emerged, blinking sleepily at them before trotting away. The moment was broken, but the feeling remained, glowing warmly in Chinyu's chest. Delhi cleared his throat softly. I should continue my rounds, Our Highness. Of course, she said, her voice barely audible. They gave a short, sharp nod, a soldier's farewell. But as he turned to go, his eyes met hers one last time. And in that look, she saw it all. The care, the respect, the unspoken promise, and the shared, painful knowledge of the impossible line between them. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving her alone with the moon and the flowers. But she didn't feel alone. She felt seen. She felt understood. And as she sat there, her hand resting on the cool stone of the bench where it stood, Princess Chinyu knew a terrifying, wonderful truth. Her heart had not just chosen a servant over a king. It had chosen its equal. And that was a choice that would change everything. The air in the Ubium Royal Palace's main conference room was thick enough to choke on. It was the kind of high-stakes meeting that defined legacies. Seated across the gleaming mahogany table were the 2 kings, Chinyu's father, Obi Chinidu Izziadi, a man whose calm demeanor was a well-honed mask for a razor-sharp mind, and the visiting Oba Adeyemi of Ibadan, a large, imposing figure whose voice boomed even in a whisper. Flanking them were their most trusted chiefs, including Chief Amizi, his face a carefully neutral slate. On one side of the table sat Prince Tund, looking every inch the modern royal in a bespoke abbata of navy and gold, a gold chronograph, watch glinting on his wrist. Opposite him, Chinyu sat poised, her hands folded in her lap, a living emblem of the proposed alliance. The topic was a brutal one, the escalating threat from a shadowy militant group, the Delta Vipers, who were disrupting oil pipelines and had just issued a direct threat to the collaborating monarchies of the South. Their message had been clear: abandon your economic projects or face swift and bloody consequences. The Vipers are not like the others, Oba Adeyemi boomed, slamming a heavy hand on the table. They are well-armed, well-funded, and they have spies everywhere. My security forces are chasing ghosts. They hit a convoy last week. 3 good men dead. My sources say they have sympathizers within the civil service, Obi Chinidu added, his voice quieter but no less grave. They know our movements before we do. Prince Tund leaned forward, a confident smile playing on his lips. With all due respect, Your Majesties, this is a matter of superior force and technology. I have already taken the liberty of contacting a premier private security firm from London, XSAS. They can have a full tactical team here within 48 hours. Their fee is substantial, but they guarantee results. Chinyu watched her father's face. He did not look impressed. Bringing in foreigners to fight a Nigerian problem is like using a sledgehammer to kill a mosquito. You might get the mosquito, but you'll also break the wall. It will create more resentment, more recruits for the vipers. Tun's smile tightened. It is a display of strength. It shows we will not be intimidated. The debate circled, getting nowhere. Tun offer more money, more foreign contractors, more displays of brute force. The kings and chiefs listened, but a sense of futility was settling over the room. Tun's solutions were expensive, but they were blunt instruments, useless against a threat that moved like smoke. Chinyu's eyes, almost against her will, drifted to the perimeter of the room. Deli stood at his post by the double doors, his gaze fixed ahead, seemingly a statue. But she saw the slight tilt of his head, the intense focus in his eyes. He was listening, absorbing every word. As Tun finished another pitch for his foreign team, a frustrated silence fell. It was then that a quiet, steady voice cut through the tension. There is another way. Every head in the room swiveled. Chief Amizi looked scandalized. The Oba's eyebrows shot up. The voice had come from Deli. He had not moved from his spot, but his posture had shifted from passive guard to active participant. Prince Tund let out a short, derisive laugh. The guard has an opinion. Obi Chinidu held up a hand, silencing Tund. His sharp eyes studied Deli. You speak out of turn. But this room is dying from a lack of good ideas. Speak. Deli gave a curt nod. Your Majesties, the vipers are not ghosts. They are men. They have families. They drink in bars and boast to women. A foreign team will not find them because they do not know where to look. They do not know the smell of the air before a storm in the creeks, or which bartender in Port Harcourt has a cousin who brags too much. He took a single step forward, his voice remaining low and respectful, but filled with a compelling certainty. You said they have spies in the civil service. This is true, but so do we. Not spies for money, but ears on the ground. The mothers in the markets, the boat captains on the Niger, the mechanics who fix their trucks. The Viper's leader, a man called Scorpion, has a weakness. It is not for money or power. It is for respect. He was humiliated by a northern general years ago. He fights for recognition, not just for chaos. He paused, letting the stunning specificity of his intelligence sink in. A foreign team will try to crush him. It will make him a martyr. But if you acknowledge him, bring him to the table under a banner of truce, not to negotiate with terrorists, but to address the grievances of the people he claims to represent, you take the wind from his sails. You offer his men a path out, a jobs program linked to the very pipelines they are destroying. You turn his fighters into foremen. You defeat him not with a bullet, but by making his cause irrelevant. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a strategy of breathtaking nuance and local understanding. It was the complete opposite of everything Prince Tund had proposed. Chief Amizi was the first to break the silence, his voice a whisper of disbelief. How do you know all this? Deli's eyes met the Obi's. It is my job to know what others miss, Your Majesty. To protect the throne, I must understand the threats that surround it. This information comes from the ground, from people who trust me, because I am one of them. All eyes were on him now, but they were no longer the eyes of superiors looking at a subordinate. They were the looks of strategists evaluating a new and unexpected player. The Oba of Abadan was staring at Deli with a deep, calculating interest. Chinyu's father had a glint in his eye she hadn't seen in years, the glint of discovering a rare and valuable asset. But the most potent look came from Prince Tund. His confident facade had cracked. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched on the table. He was not just outshone, he was rendered obsolete in his area of supposed expertise, security, and strategy. The wealth and royalty he'd relied on were useless here. He was looking at Deli not with mere annoyance, but with a hot, searing jealousy. This guard, this servant, had just humiliated him in front of both their fathers. Chinyu, however, felt a surge of emotion so powerful she had to look down to hide the proud, triumphant smile that threatened to break across her face. Her heart swelled, aching with a fierce, protective pride. This was the man she saw. The mind, the strength, the deep, unshakable connection to the very land they were trying to rule. He wasn't just a guard. He was a king in spirit, in a way Tund could never comprehend. Obi Chinidu leaned back in his throne-like chair, steepling his fingers. Chief Amizi, he said, his voice calm and decisive. We will pursue this path. Draft the initial proposal. Use the channels Delhi suggests. He then turned his gaze directly to Delhi. From now on, you will report directly to me on this matter. You are reassigned. Your new duty is to dismantle the vipers. Delhi bowed his head. Yes, Your Majesty. As the meeting adjourned, the kings and chiefs filed out, already buzzing with this new strategy. Tun stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. He shot a venomous look at Delhi before storming out without a word to Chinyu. Chinyu was the last to leave. As she passed Delhi, their eyes met. No words were exchanged. None were needed. In his eyes, she saw the quiet confidence of a man stepping into his destiny.